I remember many times when we first got to a new country that I would just feel sick every day because it was so difficult to get used to the new climate, the new food, the new living arrangements. And it would take a while before we would, feel comfortable in our new home. So I remember those feelings, and I'm sure that my kids have had the same feelings. And at times I feel bad that we put them through that, but then I have to remember that as an adult, I really, really appreciate that I had those experiences.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode number 25 of the Immigrant Life podcast, where we share stories of people who left their country to chase a better life. I'm Daniel DiBiase, and in this episode I had the pleasure of chatting with Tanya. Because of her father's job, she has been living abroad since a very young age. After graduating from university, she settled down for a while in Toronto, where Tanya and her husband Robert started a family. 12 years later, her husband got the opportunity to work in Spain, so they decided to move to Barcelona with their 4 kids. Moving the family to Spain wasn't easy though, and the immigration process took over a year. In this episode, we discussed her story of moving to multiple countries, the challenges of moving abroad as a kid, and the changes that COVID has made to the education system and what that means for kids. Before moving to my conversation with Tanya, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, and it would be great if you give us a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser. And now, please enjoy my conversation with Tanya. Hi Tanya, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. How's it going?
Good. It's getting cold.
It's getting cold. Where are you now?
We are in Grosse Ile, Michigan. It's a very small township, about 30 minutes from Detroit.
Okay. And you have a quite interesting story. You moved a lot since you were a kid. Do you want to start by telling the listeners where are you originally from? How did you get to Michigan?
Yeah, it's a weird story. So I was born in a very small town in southern Alberta in Canada, but I was only born there, never lived there. My father had joined the Canadian government, so he became a civil servant, and so we moved to Ottawa, Canada, the capital, and from there he was transferred all over the world. We lived in Maryland near Washington, D.C. We were moved to Guatemala for a while, then back to Ottawa. Then we moved to France. We lived in Paris for 3 years when I was 9, then back to Ottawa, and then finally we moved to Tokyo. And I lived there for 2 years, did my last year of high school, my first year of university there. Then decided to move to Vancouver to do university at University of British Columbia.
You lived in many different places where they were speaking many different languages. How many languages do you speak?
So growing up in Ottawa, we did French immersion. So I learned French as a second language. When we moved to France, that was great. And then when we moved to Japan, I learned Japanese, even though I'm originally of Japanese ancestry. So my ancestors are from Japan, but we never spoke it growing up. So I had to learn it from scratch when we moved to Japan. And then came back to Canada, studied Japanese for a while. And then fast forward after moving to Toronto, and then my husband was transferred to Spain for his job. And so I had to learn Spanish there.
Do you speak fluently Japanese and Spanish and French?
I think the problem became once we added Spanish, I had forgotten my Japanese. So that was a sad thing. Because Spanish is so much closer to French, it was a lot easier for me to learn Spanish quickly. But in the meantime, because I hadn't used my Japanese in so long, I think I lost most of it. So I have to go back to Japan and try to pick that back up again.
Yeah, that's the thing with languages and anything. If you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Yeah.
So you lived in many places when you were a kid because of your dad, and then you got married, and now you're moving around again with your husband. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting life, especially, You lived that as a first person when you were a kid, moving through different countries, and now your kids is exactly the same. They're moving different countries. What do you think was the best for you, or because you moved quite a bit when you were young, did that affect your life in any way? And do you see the same thing for your kids?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think I never appreciated, all the experiences that I had, all the opportunities I had, like to learn new languages, to meet new people, to see things. I didn't appreciate that until I was an adult. Because as a child going through it, I always thought it was very difficult. I'm sure we resented my parents sometimes because they were making us move to another country. We had to make new friends. We had to start new school. I remember many times when we first got to a new country that I would just feel sick every day because it was so difficult to get used to the new climate, the new food, the new living arrangements. And it would take a while before we would, feel comfortable in our new home. So I remember those feelings, and I'm sure that my kids have had the same feelings. And at times I feel bad that we put them through that, but then I have to remember that as an adult, I really, really appreciate that I had those experiences.
By sick, you mean like sick, like a physically sick,
Yeah.
I mean like a flu, or sick that you're not feeling well in that country?
No, I would feel physically sick, to my stomach.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I think if you've talked to other kids that have moved to new cities, new schools, have to leave their friends, make new friends. I mean, at the beginning, it is a very overwhelming experience.
Oh, it is. I mean, I never lived as a first person, but I remember when I was a kid, we moved to a different town. It was probably like a 10 minutes drive. But because you moved to a different school, you have to make new friends. Even that was kind of traumatic for my brother and I. And it was the same language, it was the same part of Italy. It was not a big deal. But because you have to leave your friends behind and make new friends, it was kind of traumatic.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what it means to move to another country where you have to speak the new language. You go to school and there's completely different culture where you could kind of fit in with the culture. It could be really tough for a kid to do it. But at the same time, as you said, when you become an adult, and then you can really value those experiences because you live different culture, and that's open more like your mind, and you know more languages, and that's another thing that you can use in life. You never know.
Oh yeah, I mean it changes you. I mean it changes your outlook on the world. I mean that's one of the things I appreciate the most from moving around is that you don't get this very closed-minded view of current events, of what's going on in your own country and what's going on in the world in general. Because you've experienced other cultures, you've experienced living in different places, you can more easily relate to the people that you meet with, and especially people of different cultures. So that's been very helpful.
For me, even as a career, because you work in different countries, you see how in different countries they work, and you can bring those kind of way of working into a new environment, in the new work site, and that's usually a pro because you can combine the things and make something more efficient and something in a different way that they used to do in the country you moved in.
Mm-hmm. And that skill, just being able to be flexible and adapt to a new situation, that's a really important skill for when my kids will start, university, when they'll have job interviews. Those kind of things will really be beneficial to them.
Totally. And so your kids, so far, they've been living in what country?
So all my kids were born in the Toronto area when we were living there. And then when our oldest was 11, that's when we moved to Spain. So we had, but they had, fortunately, had opportunities to travel quite a bit, even when they were young. My parents, of course, were living in Japan when we were still living in Toronto. And so we had the opportunity to bring the kids to Japan to visit their grandparents. And that was a really cool experience for them. And then, of course, when we lived in Europe, we tried to travel as much as we could to let them see all the countries around Spain. And then now that we're in Michigan, we've tried to travel quite a bit around the United States and see other states.
Yeah, that's another beauty when you move to a country like Europe or America, that you can travel quite easily. Mm-hmm. So you met your husband in university, right? Mm-hmm. And so you got married and you got an opportunity to move to Spain. You lived there for about 3 years, right?
Yeah.
So how was the experience of moving with kids? Because that was the first time you actually moved your life with kids in another country.
Well, I think that I was excited, because I had done it many times before. So to me, it didn't seem so scary, but I'm sure to my kids, it was very, very scary. And the thing that we understood too is that transitions like this are different for every child. Like, all our kids had a different experience in the countries that we've been in. Some moves are easier for one child than they are for another. My daughter had a terrible time when we first moved. She's more introverted, and so she really did not want to leave her friends. She did not want to leave Canada. She didn't want to leave our neighborhood. She struggled a lot during our first year there, whereas the other three were pretty good. They sort of settled in and made friends, and were able to enjoy the experience right away. But my daughter, it took her a good year before she was able to really feel comfortable in Spain. So it was tough for our family.
What was the tipping point that she decided to be able to start a new life in Spain?
Yeah, we had the kids in an international school, so they did not have to switch completely to Spanish or Catalan when we first moved there. They were able to learn it gradually because their friends could mostly speak English. But I think the tipping point was when I decided that I needed to pull her out of school. I felt that just the whole experience of being in school, being around so many different people all the time, as well as being in a new country, new neighborhood, new everything, that maybe I should remove one of those things from her life that was giving her a lot of stress. And so I decided to homeschool her during our second year. But then I realized shortly after that it's illegal to homeschool in Spain. So, yeah. So we were there on visas, of course, through my husband's job, and they would not renew our visas if the kids were not enrolled full-time in school. So after homeschooling for only a couple months, we had to re-register her back into school. But I think just those 3 months of being able to homeschool her, being able to create a curriculum that met her needs, and she improved drastically. It was a really, really good experience. She was able to, have more control, I think, over her own situation. And I think that helped her, gave her a lot more confidence. And she was able to go back to school. And of course, by the time we left Spain, she didn't want to leave Spain. So that was another experience.
And I guess they were fluent in Spanish after 3 years at school.
Well, you would think, right?
Yeah.
My daughter was very, very good at Spanish. She probably picked it up the best out of all the kids. My oldest son was also he's pretty fluent in Spanish. And then the third oldest, okay, but the youngest who is our most outgoing and talkative of all of our children, we figured he would pick up Spanish so quickly. And he also plays football. Mm-hmm. So he was outside constantly playing soccer with all the kids in the neighborhood. And so we thought for sure he will learn Spanish quickly. But something in him, I guess, his desire to speak quickly made it so that he only wanted to speak English. So he would listen to everybody speaking Spanish to him, and then he would just respond in English. So that's unfortunate because to this day, he doesn't speak French because we left Canada before he got into French immersion. And then he doesn't speak Spanish that well either. So
How old was your kid at that time?
He was 4.
Oh, so he was really young.
Yeah, so he was 4 when we first moved to Spain. But he has great memories of Spain. He really loved it, and especially soccer. That's where he became obsessed with soccer. So he still retains that to this day. And I think, from being from Italy, that, the passion for soccer is something unique, I think, in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
And
I think it's almost an obsession in Europe.
Yeah. But even the style of play, like we noticed that even though he played in Spain when he was quite young, like when he was 5, 6 years old, but the skills that he learned there, he still uses now and has made him just a much better player than the players that have, grown up in the United States. So.
Oh, yeah, no, I bet. This might upset somebody that listening, but I went to watching some soccer games here in Vancouver from the Whitecaps, which is the big team here in Vancouver. And I don't know, for me, that seemed like I was watching my friends back in Italy watching soccer. It was that level.
Oh, no.
So there's nothing compared to what you can see in the professional team in Italy or in Europe. It's such a different way of playing.
It is. It's a totally different level of skill that they have. But I think it's because they just do it constantly. Like he would be playing outside all year round. Like every day that he was outside playing soccer. And here, it's cold, it rains, it snows, and so, they don't get the level of practice, I guess, also that they do in Europe.
Yeah, you're not even like immersed with that culture, because probably Spain might be really similar to Italy, but everything in Italy is about soccer.
Yeah,
everything you watch in the news, everything is about soccer in Italy.
Yeah,
every kid's aspiring to become a professional soccer player.
Exactly.
Not here.
No. I think we've killed the dream now for him. I'm not sure he can become a professional soccer player anymore.
And so why did you leave Europe? Why did you leave Spain?
Well, he was on it was a 3-year delegation. So we were only able to stay there for 3 years. I would have stayed longer, I think, if we could have. And then this is the interesting thing, because we thought, okay, after the 3 years in Spain, we'll just go back to Toronto, where we had lived most of the time. And but then he received notice that he would be transferred to somewhere else. At first, we thought it was going to be Mexico. So we thought, okay, well, that would be all right, because the kids can speak Spanish and we can speak Spanish now. But then it ended up being Detroit. So that was a big change, going from Barcelona, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, to going to Detroit, which was, in my mind, a horrible city, lots of crime, lots of, it had been bankrupt. It was one of the most crumbling infrastructure. So I did not have a good image of Detroit before we moved here. But I think, now that we're here, my opinion has changed, and we've definitely made the best out of it, I think.
And do you think you're going to stay in Detroit, or you're going to move somewhere else?
We will definitely move somewhere else. I don't know when, but we're still here on visas. So eventually the visa will run out, or will be, as you know, in the U.S., the politics keep changing. And depending on who's the president at the time, the situation for foreigners may change as well. So we sort of always wait and see what kinds of policies will come out. And then with his job situation too, now that we have COVID-19, and it's really terrible here in the U.S., especially here in the Midwest where we are. And so we never know, again, with job security, and if things will change, if they will send the delegates back to their home countries, or if they'll keep them on. So we just wait and see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's such an interesting time that A couple of things here I'd like to ask you. Because COVID has changed the way we worked. And for so many people, that's a good thing because for many people, they can work from home.
Right.
And that means that what I heard is a lot of people are trying to move abroad in a country where the life is cheaper. So if you make the same money you're making home, but you save way more because you don't have the same expenses.
Yeah.
So I think that could be one of the good things about COVID that changed the way we work. And speaking of work, what do you do? Because you moved for your husband, were you able to work in the meantime while you were overseas or even now or no?
Yeah, in Spain, I wasn't able to get a work visa according to his contract. So I was able to do some small tutoring. I did teach a little bit at the international school, just on a contract basis. But once we moved here to the US, according to his visa here, I was able to apply for a work permit. So I do have my work permit, and I've been teaching pretty much for the last 4 years. So it's that actually has been a really good experience. And it's something I believe that I probably would not have done if we had gone back to Canada. Because here in the US, especially in this state of Michigan, there's a very large shortage of teachers. And so I had never taught before in Canada or, in any of the other countries that I had lived in. And this was a new career, actually, for me coming here to Michigan. And I think it was only possible because we were here in Michigan and there was such a shortage of teachers. And so they were willing to accept somebody that didn't have a lot of experience. But,
hey, what kind of teacher are you?
Well, I started as an English as a second language teacher, and I would go to different schools all over the Metro Detroit area, and I would work with the immigrant children. So ones that were were not meeting the English level that they were supposed to by their age. So, and then I started working as a Montessori school teacher. And now that school is closed due to COVID-19 and they've gone all virtual, I'm working at a preschool, but working with school-age children that are virtual. So it's really interesting. It's almost like the job that I have now is something that has been created just for this time. It's really interesting. It gives me a lot of flexibility too with what I'm able to do. So it's kind of nice.
But you're still working, or you're still teaching immigrant kids?
Now it's any kids. It's it's whoever. It's almost like mostly kids that are in high risk situations that need that extra, that extra help that they're not going to get when. Especially at this time that a lot of kids, most kids are 100% virtual learning at this time. They're going to see many kids that are sort of slipping. So they're not getting the support they need. They're not getting the resources that they would normally get if they were in school in person. And so we're trying to meet some of those needs.
Yeah, I think this is one of the worst part of the COVID is for young kids.
Yeah.
That they're going through this time where they don't have contact with other kids, they don't interact with other kids, the way they interact, it's different from how we grew up. And I'm worried about the kids out there growing up now and see what the repercussion they will have in the future because of this time. Hopefully it won't last much longer.
Yeah.
Even though we don't know that yet. But hopefully they will be able to go back to a normal life or a new normal life. I don't know exactly what's going to be after the COVID, but hopefully we'll be able to go back and interact with kids, which is the most a human kind of thing to interact with other people.
Yeah. I mean, it's especially difficult for kids that were at risk in the first place. And so here in the Detroit greater region, there's so many kids that are low income, that were struggling in school even before the pandemic, and now to take them out of school, to put everybody online. A lot of kids don't have the parental support at home either. So you've probably seen how many kids, how many parents are struggling now as they have to be at home helping their kids with school, and it's so much more difficult than most people imagined. So
I have a question. It's not related with the topic, but I'm curious because you say like kids, they are in a hard financial situation. How do those kids get the opportunity to have a virtual lesson? Because you need a computer, you need a laptop, you need something. So if you can't afford to buy those devices, how do kids get education?
Well, fortunately, I would say all schools, even the schools that are in very low income neighborhoods, are issued a laptop for each student. So if you're going to go, if your school is 100% virtual, then every student is issued a laptop. And so it's up to them to learn how to use it, to log into their lessons every day, to complete their assignments. But again, this pandemic is really going to, I think, accentuate like income inequality, because the kids that will do well are the kids that have, stable homes, that have parents that are able to help them, that can invest in giving them that extra help, like through tutoring or whatnot, that have better internet access. Because as you know, if you have even spotty internet access, your whole education can be compromised. So yeah, this is, even though these children will be given a device in order for them to do their schooling online, it is going to be a big difference between those students that live in poor neighborhoods and the students that live in well-off neighborhoods.
Oh, totally. Even see in what kind of family situation they're growing up and they're living in. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Because for kids that maybe have like a rough situation at home, they could escape from that reality and go to school with their teachers, and maybe those teachers can be their parents' figures to help them in the growing process. Now they have to spend time with the parents. Yeah. That could be really traumatic for the kids, and could be not beneficial for those kids. That's why I'm so worried about this situation for kids more than anything. Maybe kids are not, they don't get affected by COVID as the adults do, but they are affected in different way at an emotional level through these situations.
Yeah, definitely. So it is one of the big casualties of the pandemic, for sure. How these kids are missing out on not only that education, but like you said, that emotional and physical support that the schools offered them. Free lunches, free breakfast in most of these areas that are low income, as well as, like you said, a place to escape sort of the difficult situations that they face at home.
Yeah, absolutely. But the good thing, going back to be an immigrant and how the COVID is helping people that are trying to immigrate, even on the educational level, on the education system, is changing so quickly because of the COVID. Because the classes are going virtual, people are getting used to having like a virtual classes and learning over the internet, which for us, for adults, is kind of the norm. If you want to learn something new, you're going to YouTube, or you're going to Udemy, you're going to LinkedIn Learning, those kind of platforms. So that's, for us, is a normal way to learn new stuff now. But for kids, and how we see kids going to school, that's for us is still old school, like going to a proper school, going to classes with other kids. Because of COVID, I see this much more accelerating for me, what's going to be in the future. Because if you have the opportunity, so I'm not talking about the kids with low income families, but for people that can actually afford it, why would they send their kids to the school in the neighborhood just because it's close to their area, or that's because that's what we're supposed to do? Where you can take it to the best teacher in the world. They can teach, they can learn the things from the best of the best. So that's good for families, so the kids have the best education. But at the same time, for teachers, that teachers always been a class where they're always underpaid, right? They're not getting the money that doctors get, even though they have our future in their hands. They're teaching the new generations, the new skills and everything. So they should be paid more, but never been. And now with the internet, I think the meritocracy is going to play a good part of it, because if you're a good teacher, people will get you good money, and it will be easier and better for teachers to actually have a good income. And that's could be like virtually. So you can be in your home in the US or wherever you live, or can be on a sandy beach in a cheaper part of the world, where you can be Thailand, it can be Central America or some other parts. So you can have your income could be even greater when you move abroad. And if you want to move abroad, now it's easier than ever to do so, because you can work remotely. You can be a teacher, you can have work from home, and you can be able to immigrate much more easily, because maybe you don't have to find a job when you go overseas, because you already have a job, you just bring it with you.
Yeah, true.
Do you see that change in the education system, or do you think like everything's going back to normal because people or kids, they are not supposed to study over a computer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you're right. It's going to change to a certain extent, especially for those people that have the means to move abroad and to be mobile. I mean, there's definitely a lot more options available. So we've seen just during this pandemic, a lot of families that we knew were able to move back to their hometowns, or they were able to move closer to family in different states because they could work remotely. And before that, they were sort of forced to live here where the job was. But now they can move all the way across the country, still have the same job. Their kids could even be still in school here while they're living in another part of the country. That did definitely open a lot of possibilities for many people.
On the next step, when you decide to move to a new country, do you have a plan, or do you have a place where you want to go?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think we don't have a plan yet, but we would probably like to move back to Canada. We haven't been there in like 7 years now. Our youngest doesn't even remember at all where he was from or living there. So, and our oldest son, who's now graduated from high school, is living in Vancouver. So he is already there. And now that he's 18, so he's not able to be here in the U.S. with us on my husband's visa. So eventually, probably somewhere back in Canada, not sure where, unless my husband gets a transfer to another country. I'd love to go back to Europe at some point, but we'll see.
How about your kids? Do they have any preference place that they want to go?
Yeah, it's. I think it's changed over time. Like my youngest, for the longest time wanted to go back to Spain. Was always saying that his goal was to go back to Spain to play soccer. But now I'm not sure. I think he's quite happy here in Michigan, because this is the place where he's lived the longest now and for his entire life. And then my oldest son, he was pretty happy here too. He had a very good experience here in Michigan. Then he went to Simon Fraser University in Burnaby. Mm-hmm. And then my daughter, I think she would probably be okay moving. And now that, it's the lockdown, I think, and the whole pandemic that has changed again their sort of opinion of being here, because we're not able to really do much here anymore. Like the things that we were used to participating in, they're not open or they're not available to us. We can't do as much traveling. We can't see friends as much as we used to either. And so the appeal of being here is kind of gone.
Yeah.
So I think all of us would be open to moving somewhere else, just to hopefully maybe New Zealand, where
they're not affected by COVID anymore.
No pandemic.
Yeah. Hey, what's the biggest challenge that you have to face when you move with the whole family?
Yeah, well, one of the biggest challenges was the visas. The visa process for us to move to Spain was crazy. It took my husband over a year to get his visa.
Oh, wow.
And then it took the kids and I an extra 6 months after that before we got our visa. So my husband moved there by himself first to start working. And then I stayed behind in Toronto with the kids. And we had to get everything moved. I had to rent the house and had to sort of calling lawyers to see what the status was on our visas, but it was so slow. It was, they're in no hurry. Like you go to the consulate and they're just like, whatever, they don't care that, our family is separated. And then, and then I had to fly by myself with all 4 kids all the way to Spain, and we got established there. And then very soon after that, the visa finally came, so I had to fly back to Toronto by myself with all my kids to pick up the visas at the Spanish consulate in Toronto, and then fly all the way back to Spain. So, and then we had to do that again the following year, and I think we did that, I want to say 3 times.
Oh, wow.
when we were in Spain. So it was a constant worry in the back of our minds, like, oh, it's time to renew our visas. Oh, what do we have to do this time? It was kind of a pain. But here in the U.S., it hasn't been as difficult, of course, because we can do it in English. So it makes it a bit easier, but there's a lot of bureaucracy here as well. And I've had to renew my work permit now going on my 3rd time. Every time we renew our visas, it takes longer. So we have to, for example, our visa now will expire in July, and we've already begun the process of renewing our visa. It's a lot of paperwork, just a lot of, photocopying, calling old employers, and, they want to know everything, like everything that even we did in Spain, So it's, the process is getting, I think, more and more complicated for us to be in a country on a visa. Maybe due to the administration, or maybe due to this pandemic. I'm not quite sure, but the process has definitely become more time-consuming, more complicated.
I mean, definitely the pandemic played a big role into the delay of this process.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, why did you have to fly back from Spain to Toronto just to get your visa? Can you just get it delivered to Spain?
No, you have to go there in person to pick it up. And I couldn't just go by myself. I had to bring all the kids with me because they had to be there in person to pick up their visas. That's the rule.
That sounds crazy.
It is crazy, yeah. So
it sounds like as soon as you get your new visa, you start the process to get
the next
new one.
Yeah.
Pretty
much, yeah. It was like an ongoing process. So
that's like a full-time job just there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of going back and forth with the lawyers and the consultants, and lining up at this place and lining up at that place and bringing all your paperwork, dragging the kids. Yeah. So. And
that even with your husband company supporting you, right?
And that's...
So if you have to do on your own, it will be so much harder.
Mm-hmm. I know. I think about that all the time, actually. Like when we were lining up to get our visa work processed, that there were all of these families there, some that were refugees, some that are, just newly immigrating to Spain or to the US even, and they didn't have any help doing this, and it's an extremely complicated process. We have several lawyers that are working on it all the time, and if you didn't have that support, it would be a very, very frustrating and expensive process too.
Oh, totally. That's why so many people are giving up.
Yeah,
because they're like they get to the point where I'm over it.
Yeah,
even because all this process of trying to get your visa makes you feel unwanted, unwelcome. Mm-hmm. And that's the most frustrating part of the process. Because why do I have to fight so hard to stay in the country where it seems like they don't want me? I just moved somewhere else, right?
Yeah. I don't know. It's, that has been one of the most, irritating aspects of moving. And then I guess the other hard part is just getting the kids adjusted to their new life and dealing with their anxiety and even, depression over loss of friends, loss of familiarity. And as our kids are becoming all teenagers now, it's a totally different experience than from moving with younger kids to moving with teenagers, because there's even I guess, more emotion that we have to deal with. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. Even it's gonna get even harder and harder because the kids, when they're kid, they are willing to move. They're okay to move with the family, but teenagers, when they got a little bit older, especially now, one of yours is 18 years old, so it's even harder to travel, to move abroad with them. And also probably they don't even want to move anymore because they have their friends, maybe they start having relationships and they don't want to move anymore.
Yeah.
So is that why you're kind of trying to find a place where you will settle down, or you think you're going to keep going even without your kids?
I don't know. I think, I'm always, because of my upbringing, I'm pretty open to doing whatever. Like whatever comes, I will make do with, with whatever situation. I think it would be nice to move. We'll probably move one more time with all the kids as a family. Since my son's already in Canada, it would be nice to move everybody sort of to Canada so that they can have that support of being together with their siblings. As for my husband and I mean, we could maybe move later when the kids are graduated from high school and they're all on their own. So that would be a new chapter in our life. So kind of looking forward to it. But it's nice to also establish some kind of home base so that the kids know where they can go and we know where we can go if we are abroad, that we have some place to come back to. So I think we will try to establish that within our next move.
Do you feel like you're missing a place that you can call home, or you're not because you're just used to it?
I think I miss it. I think that when I see like my other siblings, because all of them are in British Columbia, and I see my parents are there now, and my husband's family is all there, I feel like we miss out on all that extended family relationships. Like the kids don't know their cousins very well. They don't know their aunts and uncles that well, or even their grandparents. So us always being somewhere else where nobody else is has been difficult in that way, that they missed out on those close family relationships. I think it brings us closer together as a nuclear family because we have to just depend on each other. But it would be nice if they had, a stronger bond with the rest of their family.
Yeah. And where was the longest place you've been so far?
Probably Toronto.
How long was that? Like how many years you were there?
We were there 12 years. 12 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So because my husband moved there for the MBA, so that was 2 years of his MBA. Then we started having kids. So, and we didn't move from Toronto until our oldest was already 11 years old when we moved to Spain. So we were there for quite a while. But I don't consider it really our home base because we don't have any other family there. Mm-hmm. It sort of was the place that we were for a long time, but maybe not the place where we want to end up eventually.
With the life that you lived in so many different countries and you were immersed with so many different culture and languages, do you feel lucky to have lived that kind of life, or you kind of have regretted that you didn't grow up in the same place, having, I don't know, living, air quote, a normal life?
Yeah. No, I really like it. I mean, I'm very, very glad that I was able to have that kind of upbringing and that we were able to move as a family as well. I think you cannot have, you can't replicate that kind of experience as actually living in a foreign country. You can travel, you can take your kids on vacation, you can visit places, but it won't be like living in another country. That is an experience you can't get except by actually, going through it. So I think it's difficult for the kids, but they will appreciate it when they get older. Sometimes I feel bad that, they didn't have the easiest life and that I'm sure they were dragged many places where they didn't actually want to be. But hopefully, in a few years, they will thank us, maybe.
Absolutely. I mean, as you said, like when you move to a new country, or actually when you go to a country as a tourist, you don't live the same experience.
Yeah.
And you don't build the same skills that you build when you actually move to a new country. We discussed this in the previous episode with Jamie, that we discussed about resilience, one of the main skills as an immigrant that you will need. And one of the things that you gain by being an immigrant, there's resilience, going like through different challenges, get used to a new life, and get like going through all these changes. And that's might be the main thing for your kids. They're growing up, they will have so much resilience, or to be so much resilient to go through other stages in life where it could be much harder. Because yes, they went through a lot of stages, a lot of changes in their life with their kids, but at the same time they were kids. Correct me if I'm wrong, but usually when you get older, the challenges are getting bigger because you get more responsibility. When you are a kid, yes, you're going through a really tough situation, but you still have the safety net of your parents. When you get older, the safety net somehow, or in some circumstances, disappear from underneath you, and then you have to be on your own and have that resilient in that situation that's really help you to achieve maybe greater things in life.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, that's the hope for sure. The experiences that are the most challenging often bring the greatest rewards, but we don't always see the rewards right away. So
it takes a while sometimes to see, to be able to connect the dots, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time to take this interview and to share your story. If somebody related with your story wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, you can contact me. I have a Facebook page, my Facebook profile is just Tanya Iwasa. It's Iwaasa Armstrong. Or I have a blog from the time that we lived in Spain. That's great for any families that are moving to that part of the world. Has great tips and tricks for moving to Spain with a family, with children, great ways to save money and to travel around that country. So it's Una Mesa para Seis. I think you can link to it on your page. Yeah,
absolutely. I don't even know how to spell that. But yeah, everything will be in the show notes for everything we discussed, and everything we talk about. It will be in the show notes on immigrantslife.com. And also your profile. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, they can connect with you directly over the show notes. They can find your link there. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tanya, for your time.
Thank you. All right. Take care.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week. You can subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, and you can find the show notes with everything we discussed at immigrantslife.com/episode 25. If you enjoyed this episode, you can share with your friends and consider leaving a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser. You can't believe how important that is to let other people find this show. Our goal is to help others in their journey as an immigrant. If you have any feedback or just want to get in touch with me, you can find me on social, just search Immigrants Life, or email me directly at daniel@immigrantslife.com. If you want to be on the show, you can send me an email or visit immigrantslife.com/yourstory. Thanks again for listening. Talk to you in the next one. Ciao.